This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is what we call finding a new way to lose. Goodness, I don't know what to say. Actually, it was such a positive game, but yeah, that finish and just the way that the whole finish transpired. Whoa! Welcome back to North Pod, joining you hot after a North Melbourne loss by 3 points to Sydney, 90-93. And sometimes you just don't know what to say after leaving the football. It was just, a weird feeling. I sort of had to dissociate, really, to be honest. It was bizarre. But I don't want to. We'll certainly talk about that. There was so much to like. So many young players who played well. Bailey Scott and Sheasel and Wardlaw, Coleman Jones. So we'll definitely talk about that. It's not going to be all negative, that's for sure. But just a heartbreaking way to lose, to be honest. Really tough. But on balance, if you take kind of the emotion out of the end in particular, it was a really good game for the boys, and it was interesting to see some new players in some new roles too, which we'll talk about. In terms of the story of the game, tough game to summarise. I thought the momentum just kept swinging around. That's kind of what I've landed on. It was a really one of those games where no team was in control for more than sort of 10 or 15 minutes at a time, and sometimes 5 minutes at a time. It was just sort of, it was swinging like a pendulum, I guess. Sydney was in the lead for most of the game, but never got that lead out past 20 points. And then, just sort of early in that last quarter, North Melbourne got ascendancy, got ahead by 15, 16 points, something like that. And it looked like 10 minutes in, they were, I wouldn't say home and hose, but they were, in the box seat, and we were. But unfortunately just got mowed down in the end and lost by that 3 point margin. And as I said, just the momentum swung backwards and forwards. And what I would say at least about this game in comparison to the West Coast and the Freo game is it didn't actually feel like we collapsed under the pressure. I thought we held up relatively well under the pressure, and obviously that moment at the end happened. And I guess the other comment to make in terms of story of the game was the umpiring often kind of led to those swings in momentum. And there was a lot of frustration being vented at the umpires by supporters. And it wasn't just supporters. I could see a lot of Griffin Logue and Luke McDonald. They spent a lot of time discussing decisions with the umpires after a goal was kicked, which I think at least is probably the only time that you can have that extended discussion with them. And who knows how respectful or, that was, but there was certainly no free kick paid for it. So, there was just some baffling decisions. And I know I've talked about how I don't like to beat up on the umpires, and it's not what it's going to be about. It was a shame. There's a couple of really puzzling decisions that were made that often did swing momentum or have an impact at least. So I can remember a time when North Melbourne's best play in the third quarter, maybe it was the fourth actually. Anyway, like they made a run down the entire field and Paul Curtis took what I thought looked to be a great mark, and a free kick was paid against him. And that just, I guess summarised what the momentum swings looked like for the match. So a really, really weird game. Lots of positives to take out if we can remove that emotion, particularly of the end. I just want to take the opportunity to again thank all my listeners for getting involved in the show. I can't thank you enough for all the messages of support and just interactions that I've had. So just please help me get the word out there. Share this podcast with any Roos fans that you know. Subscribe on your chosen podcast service and leave me a review on Apple or Spotify. Give me a 5-star rating if you can. Just helps other people to see the podcast, and get involved with me on social media at North Show, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Let's jump into the bad. We always like to start with the bad, and not as many bads as there usually are, so that's positive. The first 10 minutes were shocking, is thing number one. And I think that there was that feeling at the ground where, oh my goodness, like it's going to be another one of those days. That's what that first 10 to 15 minutes felt like. Ben Mackay and Goldstein had a couple of horror turnovers, just horrific kicks that were turned over. The intensity was lacking. And I don't think that it was in the North Melbourne half of the ground for more than 5 seconds of that first kind of 10 minutes. It looked worrying, but fortunately Sydney didn't take massive advantage. They were a little inaccurate, only kicked 2 goals 5, so we could have very easily been 4 or 5 goals down before we were able to get on the scoreboard. But yeah, fortunately Sydney didn't take advantage, so that, I think that's partly what kept us in the game early. That horrible start, but we didn't pay for it completely on the scoreboard. The second bad is, I guess it's just an area to build on, really. That cleanness around the contest is still something that we can work on. Particularly the first half, we were very fumbly. I think Wilfield was probably the exemplar of that, and I'm not having a dig at him, but he was just pretty fumbly in the contest or picking up those loose balls, particularly in the first half. He was getting his hands on it, but not cleanly. I thought Drury was similar. There was one incident where he received a handball and just dropped it, which I think led to a stoppage in the end rather than us launching it inside 50. He ended up getting subbed out. He wasn't a good game for Blake, unfortunately, but he's a third gamer, so he's got plenty to learn. That's not a problem. But it wasn't just those two. I thought across the board we were a bit fumbly, particularly in the first half, and it's just that difference in cleanness between North Melbourne, the sort of 16th, 17th, 18th best side, and if you watched the Port Adelaide Melbourne game on Friday night, in which it was soaking wet from about quarter time, that even in those conditions, I thought they were very clean in comparison to how North Melbourne performed. So it's just it's getting that bigger body, so you're less moved by defenders and just touches, repetitions. I think that's just something that we can work on, and that's a sort of thing where you look at Sheasel and you go, gee, he is clean. He's just got that extra class that we lack, I guess, holistically in the side. So yeah, hopefully a bit of consistency of getting games can help us with that. The next negative was something that we've talked a little bit about consistently on the podcast, and it was just that inability to defend the ground effectively. And to slow Sydney down when they took it through the middle in transition. There was a couple where they got a sort of fortunate bounces, Sydney, and I wouldn't necessarily say it was North Melbourne errors that led to Sydney getting at the back, but there was definitely a few where they just blitzed our zone with speed and 1 or 2 good kicks, and they were at the back. That's how Franklin scored one of his. He kicked 3 on the night. But yeah, often they found a bit of space, and particularly in the middle, it was, if a side's blitzing you through the middle, there's something gone wrong with the zone, because the zone is set up such that you're pushing them, hoping to make them kick long down the line essentially, or you're wanting them to bite off that pass and with the hopes to intercept it. So yeah, again, something to work on. I think a lot of that just comes down to that young midfield group that's still a little bit disorganised when defending the spread, and we saw that in the Port Adelaide game where the North Melbourne players were often getting too sucked into the ball, I guess being magnetised in towards the contest, and that just comes with maturity and trusting the system. I think it's not something to be massively upset about, it's just something to work on, I guess. And that being said, I mean, the Sydney Swans, for the most part, had their A-grade midfield in, albeit without, a ruck for a lot of the game. But yeah, just Sydney's ability to go coast to coast quickly and really give their forwards one-on-one or even outnumber opportunities at the back probably cost us 5 or 6 goals. And it's just been a theme across the year. We saw that. I feel like it really started in earnest, probably in the Brisbane or the Carlton game, one of those two, where the zone is getting beaten. And I know that we're tweaking things as we go, but that was just it was a glaring thing that we noticed that. I reckon North Melbourne only took the ball up the field like that once or twice for the game, whereas Sydney must have done it 8, 9, 10 times possibly. Yeah, I think it's just around organising the zone and particularly that midfield group defending a little better as a group. And now I can't avoid it any longer. We've got to talk about the end to the game, and I think what we have to remember as supporters is at the end of the day, and as who knows, maybe something will come out during the week. I'm recording this Saturday night, so only couple of hours after the game. But as far as I can tell, like we've made the error. It seems like two players came off at the same. We only had one sub left, and two players have come off at the same time, and therefore two have come back on. And it was just a litany of unfortunate things where the penalty for that is free kick or possession and a 50-metre penalty, and obviously the ball was already in Sydney's forward pocket, so it became a certain goal. Whereas if we'd made that mistake and it's in our forward pocket, sure, it's still a big penalty, but Sydney's got the ball sort of in the middle of the ground rather than kicking a goal from the goal square. And again, like who knows? Like momentum was with Sydney at that point. I think when the free kick was paid, there was something like a minute 20-ish left. Obviously, the ball was in the forward pocket. It was about to be a ball up, and maybe Sydney win the game from that point anyway. It's obviously impossible to know, but it was just gut wrenching way to lose. Particularly after the way that we'd started that last quarter, it was I feel like there was a real sense of belief with the supporters and the players that we were going to get that one, because the way that we were, just the freneticness of that fourth quarter, and the third quarter was a great attacking quarter. It was goal for goal there, but we just have to remember that we made the mistake, to be honest, and it's a frustrating way to lose. It feels harsh. It seems like maybe potentially there were some ways that it could have been avoided, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of that angst was around the people at the ground not really understanding what's happened. Like I was certainly one of those. I sort of suspected that it might be a interchange infringement because I couldn't think what else it would be, like what else the umpire would be trying to listen to his headset for. But there's a few people around me that were saying, "Oh no, it's for a North Melbourne dissent." I thought, I don't think that's the case. I'm sure they're dissenting with the decision, but I'm not sure that the decision was for dissent. And then I didn't love the crowd's response, which is obviously it's all North Melbourne fans that did that. If you didn't catch up with it, there was a lot of rubbish thrown on the ground after the final siren, which I guess was directed at the umpires in terms of how the game was umpired, and I'm sure that last decision, was part of that frustration. And I didn't think the umpiring was good on the night, but as I've said on the podcast before, I don't have it in me to get that worked up about it because we're not a good football side, and sure, maybe the quality of umpiring is not elite at the moment, but who are we to be judging their ability when we can't, kick a ball straight half the time? So, it was frustrating, but I was a bit embarrassed by some of those supporters that were throwing stuff onto the field. It's not a good look. I didn't like that. But anyway, it's over. I get the frustration. I just wish that we'd, given the umpires a boo like every other team does, and then moved on. Anyway, all right, let's stop talking about the bad because there was so much positive to come out of this game. It just got overshadowed a bit by, I guess, the rest of those negatives in terms of the umpiring and the way that it ended. So let's, I do want to focus on the good. I'll just start broadly. There was some really good individual performances in different contexts. So, Wardlaw is the easy one. Obviously came in for his debut. We found that out on Thursday with a very, very funny video from Braden George. yeah, I mean, he came in and had an immediate impact, had 16 touches, 9 tackles, 31 pressure acts, 6 clearances, and led the team for tackles and pressure acts in his first game. He was immense. He took a really big hit going for putting his body on the line in the air in the middle of the ground towards the end of the second quarter, and he was just frenetic. He didn't give up on a ball. He's one of those players that you sort of, he doesn't look like he's supernaturally gifted just in terms of the way that he moves. Whereas Sheasel does. Sheasel's got that kind of oozes class with the way that he moves. Wardlaw doesn't have that, but he's just really, really efficient, really competitive, quick, and really strong given he's, only 18 or 19. So he had a really good debut. I thought he was really impressive. It's a shame, much like Blake Drury a couple of weeks ago, who shanked his chance at kicking his first goal. I think he hit the point post with his first attempt at goal, but then not long later he was lacing it out to Goldie, who did kick a goal. So yeah, really great debut from Wardlaw, and I think just makes us all feel a bit better about the old situation from the end of last year. Staying with the new lads, I thought Sheasel was fantastic. Finally got let loose in that midfield and forward line. He started in the forward 50. I wondered if he was going to play most of the game forward, but he spent far more time in the middle and then sort of rested forward. 25 touches, 2 goals. Just did what we knew that he would do eventually. I did think that he was going to spend most of the year in defence, just given that's where he played 8 or 9 weeks. But obviously the coaches have decided let's see what he looks like at AFL level forward, and yeah, I mean, he didn't disappoint. He was fantastic. Eddie Ford in for his first game for the year, had 21 touches and kicked a goal. Just always presented a strong marking option up and down the wing. He played most of the game off the wing, and yeah, he was a really good target. Replaced what I guess Curtis Taylor had been trying to give us this year, so I can't see him losing his spot. I thought, he was better than I expected him to be honest. I thought, yeah, really, really promising for Eddie. Coleman Jones had 16 touches, 2 goals, 2 goal assists, 7 marks, including 2 good contested grabs, and had 8 hit-outs. He certainly, Goldie certainly did the bulk of the ruck work and was the better ruckman, but it was great to see another target next to Larkey. I just love the fact that Coleman Jones is a big, bulking forward. He's not another one of these kind of mid-sized forwards that, can mark on the lead or crumb. He's a marking forward, but yeah, he's a little bit more crafty than he looks. He gave off a few handballs. As I said, he had 2 goal assists, and I thought, yeah, he was really good. I was really impressed with him, and I hope that we can see some more games like this. It'll be interesting at the end of the year to see if if we want to play Larkey, Coleman Jones, and Comben, or if that's too tall. Great problem to have, I guess, come the end of the year. So he was good. I thought Bailey Scott, I probably owe him a bit of an apology. I said he was close to being dropped last podcast, and I stand by the fact that he hasn't had a great year so far. He's been okay, but he had by far his best match for the year. He had 33 touches, 12 inside 50s, 7 clearances, kicked a goal, 1,000,000 metres gained. He had a really, really good game, Bailey Scott. Just always found himself kicking it sort of 40 to 50 metres towards goal. There wasn't a lot of his touches that were kicking sideways or anything like that. He looked a lot clean now that he'd been in recent weeks. Yeah, he was really, really, really good. And that's the exact kind of game for a winger that we're looking for, and that we thought we're going to get from him. So yeah, he was really impressive, to be honest. And then the 2 captains, McDonald and Simpkin. I'll start with, I think Simpkin was better. I just thought McDonald, he, like Scott, hasn't had a great year. And McDonald had 20 disposals. Like he wasn't sort of in that 2021, whichever of those 2 COVID years that he won the best and fairest. He wasn't quite back to that, but I just thought he attacked the footy and backed himself at the right times. He looked a bit more confident. I think he's kind of been lacking a bit of confidence in the way that he attacks the ball recently, but he looked good. He made some sound decisions. He didn't have any of those brain farts that he's had in previous weeks. So it was good to see him kind of find a bit of form, and he spent some time on Papley. I think Miller Bergman spent some time on him too, but Papley really didn't have much of an impact on the game. So yeah, McDonald was good, and Simkin just amazing. He had 28 touches, 8 clearances, kicked 2 goals, kicked our first goal when it looked like we were really struggling, and yeah, he had a great game, fitting given its Indigenous round, Sir Doug Nicholas round. Simkin was a fantastic leader today, and that is the kind of performance that I think we're looking for from our captains. If those two played like that every week, we'd be in a fantastic position, I think. It's great to see Simkin as a midfielder kicking a couple of goals. He doesn't need to kick two every week, but you'd love. I mean, if he ended the end of the year with 22 goals, like that'd be fantastic. Kick a goal a game. So yeah, Simkin was really good. I thought his first half was fantastic. His second half was nearly as good. And he was just, yeah, he was everything that we really wanted our midfield bull to be, particularly with LDU out. So yeah, there's, I guess, a snippet of how many is that? About 7 of our best players on the day. The next good, which is a bit of an ironic one, Paul Curtis might have kicked goal of the year. And I'm sure, I don't think he will. I mean, goal of the year is voted on by the public, and it's hard to imagine that a goal like that's going to win it for a North Melbourne player with not a lot of, not a huge fan base. But, I mean, it was very similar to his goal last week against Port Adelaide. He did a double fend off, picked it up off the ground, kicked a goal with his left foot, wrong side for a left footer. It was, it was it was an amazing goal. I was up that end of the ground, and you sort of didn't believe it was going to go in. I thought when he shaped to kick it that he was going to just try and hit the top of the square, and who knows, like maybe that's what he was trying, but it just drifted in. Wish that he got a little bit more involved in the rest of the game. I think that was only kick for the half. But gee, yeah, that was some kind of goal. So really excited to see what we can get from Paul Curtis this year. I know he had a great first season. He's been a bit more quiet this year, but playing in that forward line's been tough. So it was, yeah, really good to see him hit the scoreboard. He had another opportunity to kick a second, but just missed a snap. So a really, 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 really exciting goal. You just love the double fend off. It's giving Dustin Martin or Ben Cunnington. Amazing. So that was good. I thought that something that's been lacking over the past couple of weeks, and I've talked about it a fair bit, is at the tackling, and that pressure was really good after that slow start. We beat Sydney in the tackles 72-62, which I don't remember, beating a side in tackles like that this year. And that's 20 more tackles than we're averaging, so makes a big difference. We had 17 tackles inside 50, and we're averaging about 9. And Sydney only had 13. So that tackling pressure was really up, which is something that we haven't been able to execute in other matches this year. And as I said, the pressure acts, I mean, George Wardlaw led us with 31. Greenwood had 26. Spicer and Simkin had 21 each. You just felt like there was more of those opportunities to actually lock the ball in. And when I think about those tackles inside 50, those 17 tackles, it really dawned on me watching the game that I haven't seen too many ball ups inside our attacking 50 this year, and that's obviously because we haven't been tackling. So clearances are something that we're relatively good at as a team, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if we're getting ball ups inside 50, that's a good chance for us to score, given we've got a dominant ruckman in Goldstein, and we've got some really elite midfielders, contested ball players. So yeah, it was really good to see that pressure up and matching Sydney. Obviously they didn't at either end of the ground, they were kind of lacking some class, but they're an AFL side, and I'd say we beat them in terms of the pressure game. So yeah, the pressure acts are fantastic. Wardlaw, to lead the team for pressure acts in your first game is something special. I thought he was just always putting the pressure on the kicker or tackling. So yeah, it was fantastic. Next thing, our ball movement was probably, at times, it was the best it's looked all year. It wasn't that we were going coast to coast all the time, but I thought that we were more methodical, or I guess more accurate when we're kicking. Again, those the first 10 minutes that first quarter, if we write that off, because that was like how we've been playing the rest of the year. But besides that, I thought our handball game was really good. There was a lot of forward handballs, but they weren't those ones selling us into trouble for the most part. It was giving us ground that allowed us to put the Sydney defence under pressure. I can think of a really good example was Larky's goal just towards the end of that third quarter. There was a chain of a couple of forward handballs that allowed Larky to, I guess, well, allowed us to launch the ball inside 50 and get Larky in a one-on-one situation. Because the forward handballs gave us that extra kind of 30 or 40 metres before the kick came, it put that Sydney defence under pressure. Whereas if you're not getting those chains, that kick's probably, landing in a spot where like he's having to compete 1-on-3. So, yeah, our handballing game, particularly in that second half, the scoring really improved in the third and fourth quarters for both sides. But yeah, our handballing chains were really impressive, and for the most part, we looked clean in the second half. And yeah, I just thought it was great to see the likes of Phillips and Powell and obviously Wardlaw and Sheasel alongside Simpkin really chaining up some of those, and Bailey Scott chaining up those handballs down the wing, which allowed us to get some deeper entries. We still were less efficient than Sydney inside 50. I think that's just a function of where we're at right now, but it wasn't as bad as it's been in previous weeks. So yeah, that was really good. And just the last thing, I guess, was we stayed in the game and we nearly won this thing. We should have won. We smashed Sydney in the centre clearances, like dominated them. We had 53 hitouts to 29. The clearances was 47 to 27. Beat them in centre clearances 18 to 8. Beat them around the ground 29 to 19. And again, we certainly had the more able ruckman. Sydney's ruckman went down. Laddams went down, I think, the third quarter with an injury. It looked a bit serious, so obviously they lost one of their ruckmen. But yeah, I mean, Sydney's midfield, except for their ruckman, was pretty much in there. Like, they had Parker in there, they had Warner in there, they had Rowbottom in there. So they had a lot of their prime movers, I guess, and we just looked like the better contested ball team today. And given we had Wardlaw and Sheasel in there a lot of the time with Wilfield and obviously Simpkin, that's what we want. It's what we want, those young players coming to the fore. And I thought often those clearances were actual useful clearances that were at least to a 50-50, whereas in previous weeks we've won the clearance game but have just sort of been bombing it, not to our players' advantage. So yeah, I mean, that's some of the goods. There's probably more goods I could talk about, but yeah, it's hard to be super, super, super positive when the game ends the way that it did, I guess. So that's that game. I'm still trying to figure out how we lost it and processing it all. Let's, I guess, talk about the other big news from the week, which was obviously Clarko stepping away indefinitely, which happened on Thursday, with Brett Ratton being installed as the caretaker. And I'm just not sure how to feel about it. It's a weird one, bit of a delicate one. I think, as someone in my position, it's probably best that I mostly stick to the footy talk, because that's what I think I can bring a bit of knowledge to, at least. I think it's really hard for people on the outside to talk about the Clarko situation. Obviously, I hope that his mental health improves, and I hope that he gets into a place where he's, feeling like he can coach the side. Absolutely. It's just a bit tricky, to understand how he's gotten to this point and what might have transpired all those years ago, potentially. So, yeah, hopefully things can get worked through. Just feels at the moment like a bit of another kick in the guts to the club when, obviously this doesn't involve North Melbourne as a club. It just happens to involve our coach, who, we hired for the job not long before this all started. It seems like there's been some rumours kind of going around that the AFL is just going to lock down the investigation, or close it down essentially. Which, yeah, again, I just don't really know how to feel about that. It just, I don't know. It seems, I'm sure these allegations are not completely incorrect. I guess that's where I'm coming from, in that people don't make up, or the amount of people there are don't make stuff up. The truth always lies somewhere in the middle, I guess, and I do wonder if the AFL is just going to say this is all too hard, let's throw it away. I don't know if that's a great look. Anyway, as I say, I don't profess to be an expert in this, and I'm not trying to tell anyone how to run a big investigation like that. I just, yeah, I hope that it's not too much of a distraction for the club moving forward. I mean, it's going to impact us obviously, but it was great that we've got Ratton as a ready-made caretaker available. And yeah, I mean, from what I've seen in terms of the last couple of days with how he's handled it, looks like he's jumped in, and the players, on at least from the outside, look like it's not affecting them super negatively. But again, like, who knows what's going on inside people's heads. So yeah, I mean, that was obviously massive news, and we'll have to see when Clarko is or is not coming back. And again, just Taron Thomas is back in the AFL system. It doesn't look like he's going to play AFL immediately. We haven't really got an indication around when he might, be likely to be selected, because you'd think if he's available, he's in, given his talent. It would be great to hear from the club, and I guess maybe that'll happen when he gets a game, just in terms of hear from him in an official capacity and from the club around what's transpired that's allowed him to be back where he is. I feel like we've just had comments around, he's done what he needs to do, but I get it'd be nice to know what that actually looks and feels like. But yeah, I mean, he had another good game in the VFL, which I guess we may as well talk about now. The VFL side lost to Casey by 15 in a bit of a shootout, and Taron, yeah, he had a goal, kicked a goal late, had 26 touches and 8 tackles. So he played well again. Cooper Harvey with a big haul again, kicked 5 goals and had 20 touches. So, he's finding some form in the VFL, which is great. Cunners had a goal and 32 touches and just a lackadaisical 17 clearances. So it's great to see him. He's finding that form that he hasn't been able to find at AFL level. Probably the only other two that are worth talking about. Lazaro had a goal and 33 touches, 7 tackles. So I do feel like at some stage this year he's going to get a chance, whether or not he's the future for us. I'm not sure, but I think he does deserve a chance more than just getting a bit of game time as the sub. And Curtis Taylor had 24 touches. I think just did what we've been asking him to do in the AFL. So didn't light the house on fire. But yeah, I mean, a 17-point loss to Casey's not bad. Obviously, they're a good VFL side. Got plenty of AFL players like Melksham, and Ben Brown was there. Yeah, decent showing, and a couple of those players putting a bit of pressure on. Lazaro and Cooper Harvey in particular, really good. So, yeah, I mean, let's have a look to that next week's game against Collingwood. Sunday game, 3:20 at Marvel. So, a Collingwood home game, one of those Collingwood home games that gets played at Marvel. Yeah, going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really tough to be competitive given how well the Pies have been playing. But, I mean, you never know. We took it right up to them last year and just fell apart in the last couple of minutes. So, look, you never know. They weren't quite the side that they are now last year, but they weren't far off it towards the end of last season. So, look, you never know. Under the roof at Marvel, we played quite well today, so you never know. I wouldn't think that there would be too many unforced changes. We played so well holistically. Zerha was only supposed to be a week with that facial injury that he had, so you would think that he's going to come straight back in if he is ready. So maybe a Spicer or a Drury could head out for him potentially, which is probably a bit harsh on either of them, just given they haven't had heaps of opportunity. But they're the sort of two that I'd think would be in the frame to be dropped. And maybe if Perez is back from his concussion, potentially he would come back in for someone like Hall. I don't know. I'm not sold on Perez. I think he does deserve more of a chance, to be fair. I just feel like I don't know if I need him in the side immediately, but he was the only one that was really a shorter injury that might come back in. Drury's been quiet the last 2 weeks, so if I'd say he's probably more risk than Spicer. Spicer only really had the last two, and he's looked okay. He's got around the ball. He just needs that composure. Whereas Drury, I think, has found it harder to come about the ball since his debut. That first half that he played against St Kilda was really good, and since then he's been pretty quiet. So, might just need to spend some more time back in the VFL getting some confidence and form. The only other thing that I'd like to, I guess, talk about, now that they've moved Sheasel into that forward mid role, I think similar to in defence, I'd love us to see. Let's see him stay there at least until LDU's back, and possibly after that. But LDU's leaving a gap there. Let's let Sheasel and Wardlaw kind of try and fill that gap together. We've got enough sort of running defenders that I think, Sheasel plays fantastic there, but we do have other players that can, fill that role. I think Bergman's doing a great job at the moment, and, maybe towards the end of the year, Goda might be able to come in there and do something similar, I guess. It'll be interesting to see if Core comes back in or not. I think having the two defenders there in Mackay and Logue worked well, but there wasn't, besides Franklin, who obviously is a massive player, like they didn't have another tall forward of note. They had their resting ruckman, and that was it. So we certainly didn't need three talls. Collingwood doesn't have a super tall forward line either, so maybe Core doesn't come back in. I wonder if having one less tall in the defence was a good thing for us, or who knows? It might be matchup dependent, I guess. But Core hasn't been in fantastic form ever since he pulled on the blue and white jumper. I just always think he's going to be slightly better than he is, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe he'll be made to earn it a bit in the VFL, given it was a pretty undisciplined act that got him suspended. We'll have to wait and see. But I think Mackay played an okay game. I didn't talk about the defence much for the rest of the podcast. I thought Mackay was decent. I thought Logue was decent. They were certainly spoiling it a bit. Mackay had a couple of intercept marks. I think, to be fair, aside from when the ball got walked through the midfield, and through the middle of the ground, the defenders, I think the North team was set up really well to help those defenders, which is what we've been talking about all year. Is the defence has looked shaky, but because the ball's been getting so cleanly to them, and I think that was an improvement actually. Just reflecting on it now as I'm thinking about it. Anyway, that's all for the pod. It was just such a weird feeling. I know it's so frustrating to play that well and not get the win, but so many positive signs, and at the end of the day, a win's great for morale, and we definitely want to have some more this year, but beyond that, it's not getting us. We're not making finals. Probably the only reason to win at this stage is morale, and see if we can get Ben Mackay to stay, because that's maybe something we need to talk about in the next couple of weeks around his free agency, because that is a worry, the amount of losses that he's played in for us. Anyway, thanks for listening. Remember to like and subscribe and all those good things. Hit me up on Twitter, NorthPod Show. Give me a follow. Hopefully we can get along to the Collingwood game. I'm sure there won't be too many people going there with confidence, but at the same time, sometimes it's nice to go with no expectations and just hope for the best. So have a great week, everyone. Let's hope that there's no disasters that come midweek like last week. We can have a settled look ahead to next week. Go Roos.